All right, everyone, welcome to Chapter 4 of Turfgrass Pest Management. This is Chapter 4 of the Turfgrass Pest Management book for Category 3A pesticide applicators here in Michigan. And this is basically to help you study for it if you're trying to take your 3A exam or, just a refresher, right? I know some of you out there are studying for this, so I hope it helps. And this one's going to be all about application equipment. It's a relatively short chapter. It's pretty straightforward, pretty easy to grasp. The next chapter is going to be a little bit more difficult. It's about calibration. So without further ado, let's dive right on in. So this right here, this is a Stinger. I think they call it a gateway applicator. They're pretty cool ride-on sprayer spreader. Interesting design. And I actually saw one for the first time at the Michigan Green Industry Association trade show and conference. And I thought those were pretty cool. So I wanted to include a picture of that because a lot of us out there that are going to be doing turf grass management, we're going to be using ride-on devices because it's not cost effective to do walk behinds or anything like that. So if you don't know me, if you haven't known me, if this is your first time watching me, my name is Austin Douglas. I'm the owner of Elevate Applicate and Ditch the Itch Poison Ivy and Mosquito Control Services. And my goal behind this is just to help you hopefully pass your exams or maybe, teach you some things that might be relevant to you. In the future, hopefully, this series will be worth continuing education credits. And so it's always good to check our website to see what our most up-to-date seminars are that have continuing education credits attached to them. If you're in Michigan, we have quite a few, so we can help you renew your license. You just got to go to elevate-applicate.com/current-seminars. And then that'll take you to our website and our page where we have all our current seminars listed. And then the way to access those seminars is to become a member. And then you have open access to all of that information. It's pretty cool. Hopefully this will be worth some credits in the future, but as of right now, as of this recording, it is not. Right now, I'm actually seeing how long it takes to do all of the chapters for this book, and then I'm going to submit it for credits once I complete all of the chapters. So let's dive in. Okay, so what are the objectives behind Chapter 4 here, pesticide equipment? It's to describe the various types of pesticide application equipment that you'll be using to take care of turf grass, the basic components of sprayers and spreaders, how to properly apply pesticides using a granule or a spray application, and how to operate and maintain sprayers. Also, we want to know how to protect equipment from failure, right? What can we do? How do we maintain it? How do we clean it? How do we keep it operating? As we learned in the previous chapter, it's actually law to have properly maintained and upkept equipment, because if you don't, you could have spills and leaks and stuff like that, and it's not good. All right, so this right here is a table in the book, Table 4-1, Common Sprayer Problems. We can see, from this table, what do we do if we have a loss of pressure in our sprayers? What could be the cause? Well, they have listed 4 causes, right? The pressure regulator could be not adjusted or stuck open. The suction screen could be plugged. The suction hose cracked or porous. The pump could be worn out. And how do we fix that? Well, we adjust the pressure regulator, clean the screen, replace the hose, or replace or recondition the pump. This is a really good table to observe and pay attention to. You're probably, if you're taking the exam for 3A, you might get questioned on one of these, maybe 2. But yeah, this is just one of those things where it kind of walks you through, the step-by-step guide of how to fix an issue, right? What's happening if you have excessive pressure, if the pressure gauge needle's jumping like crazy, if you got a plugged nozzle, what do you do? So I recommend that you look at this in the book. If not, then you can just take a look at this, pause this right now and look at it. But ideally, our equipment must be in proper working order. Like I said, by law, they do have it in 636 that we should have quality equipment that's not leaking or breaking down or anything like that. It needs to be calibrated. So we're going to learn how to do calibrations as well. Ideally, I think calibration is more or less in Chapter 5. So we're not going to dive down that too much in this presentation. But in chapter 5, it's going to be all about calibration and how to properly apply and how to figure out how much you're going to need, etc. So that's going to be pretty heavy. But it's ideal to have a maintenance record for your equipment, right? Proper maintenance is going to result in fewer breakdowns. When you have fewer breakdowns, you have more uptime. When you have more uptime, you can go out there and you can service more clients. And at the end of the day, that just means more dollars in your pocket, more dollars in the company's pocket, and happier clients. So we don't want to break down. We don't want spills. We don't want leaks. If you have spills or leaks, you have to have a spill kit like we talked about in chapter 3. You need access to one. All of my trucks have spill kits. We're ready just in case. We're trained on it just in case. And, you don't want it, but it does happen. So you just have to be ready for it. Okay, what are the basic components of spray equipment? Well, we have a tank. Those are generally going to be made of poly, which is like a plastic material. Fiberglass, you see those. Those are kind of older. They still make them. They do last pretty long, but they're heavier. And so that's kind of one of the downsides of fiberglass. Poly is lighter, but it'll break down faster. And then in rare instances, older sprayers, you'll see steel. You still see steel in hand pump sprayers for like crack and crevice treatments for general pests and things like that. But as far as like turf grass goes, you're probably not going to have steel. You'll have poly or fiberglass. You can have pumps. There's a lot of different types of pumps. You got piston pumps, diaphragm pumps, all different kinds of pumps. And each one has their own pros and cons when it comes to it. Yeah. So what about valves? Well, we have on-off valves, we have agitation valves, we have return flow valves. There's a lot of different valves, and depending on what system you're running, you might be faced. I've seen systems with like 20 different valves on them. And, you really got to know your system and know what they go to, because if you flip the wrong valve, you can do some damage, pretty expensive damage to a system. And then we have the output, right? Which is designed to deliver spray solution with accuracy and effectively, essentially. Okay, so this might be hard for you guys to see. I hope not. In my actual slideshow that I built, the text was actually black. So in what I'm using to record this, for whatever reason, it switched it to white. I don't know why. But again, continuing down the line of the basic spray components, we have spray guns. They're traditionally used for ornamental applications, not necessarily ideal for turf applications because it's difficult to obtain a uniform coverage. Typically in lawn care and turf applications, you're going to see showerhead spray guns. Those are more or less designed for lawn applications. There's a lot of different brands out there. A really common one that guys talk about, it would be a Lesco brand, and then they have interchangeable tips or nozzles. And it can be adjusted, right? You could have a wide stream, you could have a skinny stream, you could have a cone. There's all different kinds of adjustments. And you can even adjust to where the output is different, where you can have, half a gallon per minute come out or 4 gallons a minute per minute come out. So, a lot of different kinds. You just got to tailor it to what you're doing. There are wands. Wands you will find on handheld equipment, and you'll also find them on ride-on sprayer spreaders. Typically on the ride-ons, you're going to have an auxiliary tank next to you. You'll have a certain type of product in that. Maybe it's going to be, a broadleaf weed application. And while you're doing your fertilization or, whatever treatment you're doing, you're using that wand specifically to target certain things. So it's a spot treatment. With backpack sprayers, same thing. You'll have a wand, and you'll probably use that more or less for a spot treatment. They're generally long, rigid tubes. They can be plastic, they can be brass, they can be steel, various different types of materials. But they're ideal for spot sprays, and that's what you're going to use them for. They're actually the main tool that I use in my pest control company when we deal with poison ivy and invasive species. Okay, we also have spray booms. Spray booms you'll see on ride-ons. They'll be on the front typically, and they might have 4 to 6 nozzles depending on the size of them. They could have fold-up sections or fold-in sections, so you can change the swath of what you're doing. They're really cool. They really made our jobs a lot easier when we're out there doing turf grass applications. But it utilizes multiple nozzles to deliver material. The length of the boom, the height from the ground will determine the spray width. So the higher you are, okay, as it sprays down, it can travel further out. But if it's lower to the ground, it's more direct. So most booms, I want to say, are roughly maybe 12 to 18 inches off the ground. Probably 12 is more of a sure bet, unless you're dealing with like agriculture, and then those booms are up pretty high. So let's talk about nozzles, because there's a lot of different kinds of nozzles. They break up the spray solution into droplets. So rather than a solid stream that comes out of what you're spraying or straight out of the hose, it's going to take that and it's going to diffuse that into droplets. Those droplets can be different sizes. It can be a mist. It can be a little bit thicker. It all depends on what your application is and what type of nozzle you have. The goal of a nozzle, though, is to spread uniformly whatever material you're using in a specific pattern, unless it's used outside of its specified rate or pressure ranges. At that point, it's not going to be uniform because you're not operating within its certain parameters. Or you could also have a clogged screen that's causing that. So if you got a clog on one side, it might be spraying offset and not be a uniform pattern. So you always got to check your screens, check your nozzles, make sure that they're applying correctly. They're classified by their delivery pattern, the angle of how it sprays, the discharge rate, and what they're made of. So they could be plastic, steel, brass. Certain pesticides are more abrasive, and they can change the output. If you have really abrasive materials, plastic will wear out pretty quickly. Steel and brass will wear out more slowly. So it all depends, right? Plastic tips, you got to constantly be checking your calibration and your rate and your output to make sure that, as they wear out or as they wear, you're applying it correctly, because it can change pretty quickly depending on how many properties you're actually servicing. Okay, so I'm going to disappear for this one. So a controlled droplet applicators. Those are rotary spray nozzles. They're like spinning cups with grooves that fling through centrifugal force. They're gravity fed, and the droplet size is going to depend on the cup diameter, the speed, and the flow rate of the material. This is an application that works well with turf. It provides an adequate coverage. There's a small amount of pesticide. There are disadvantages, though. The droplets can be too small to see, and then that can result in missed coverage. If you're going to use one of these, it might be ideal to add a dye so that way you can see, where you've applied. Because like I said, if the droplets are too difficult to see, then you might have to add an additive so you can see. Another disadvantage is that the spray solution is highly concentrated. And if you use one of these, it's advised to wear additional layer of chemical resistant clothing to reduce exposure. Now, I haven't really seen these per se in the field. I can't recall ever seeing these in a commercial setting. I don't know if you'll be using them, but it's good to know, right? Okay, so small capacity sprayers. These are more ideal for the spot treatments, right? Small turf areas or areas where you can't access with larger machinery, right? Think of narrow strips where a ride-on sprayer spreader can't get into. You hop off with like a backpack or a hand pump sprayer. You go through there and you just touch up the area so that way you take care of the weeds or the insects or whatever it is that you're treating. They're relatively inexpensive. They're easy to use, and most use compressed air to pressurize the tank. Think of like a hand pump sprayer, right? They're small, condensed, pump it up, you got pressure, go out there and treat it. They're generally a 1 to a 5 gallon capacity because, again, these aren't really big. And they might require agitation depending on the product that you have. If the product requires agitation, most products that I personally use don't require too much agitation. They stay in suspension. And it may require pumping to maintain pressure. Nowadays, you're only going to use hand pump devices if you're being cheap or if the company that you're working for is being cheap. And why I say that is because there's a lot of electric sprayers out there, hand 2-gallon sprayers, 1-gallon sprayers, and electric 4-gallon backpack sprayers. So this is something that in a pinch, say you had something break down, your electric backpack broke, or your electric 2-gallon sprayer broke, you could run to the department store and pick up one of these and finish off very cost effectively, so to say. But for the most part, I would recommend to get into electric. They're really nice. They save you if you're going to have to do a lot of pumping. I did a lot of pumping on a 2-gallon sprayer for my first 6 years as a pesticide applicator. That's all I used was a 2-gallon sprayer, and I hand pumped, and it was miserable. And I told myself I was never going to do that again. And so the first thing that I did when I started my company was buy a really nice electric backpack sprayer. I can't speak highly enough of Flow Zone. Phenomenal products, phenomenal backpack. You'll love it if you try one. Okay. True endorsement. No, I don't gain any money by telling you that, but it's just a phenomenal product. Okay, now let's talk about some hydraulic sprayers. So majority of large-scale turf applications use hydraulic sprayers. It's either going to be through a spray gun or through a boom. And hydraulic sprayers tend to produce pressures anywhere from 0 to 200 psi. And the application rates can vary pretty significantly. You could spray, 32 ounces over 1,000 square feet, or you could spray hundreds of gallons an acre. And so that's a pretty significant difference, right? So it all depends on what you're doing. I think most ride-on sprayers that you would be using, I think they have like a 25 or 30 gallon capacity. And I think the goal is to have enough material that you could do an acre at a time. The tank capacity can vary. They can be anywhere from 30 to 1,000 gallons. Generally speaking, you're probably not going to see a 1,000-gallon sprayer riding around on the turf, but you might see a tanker truck that a guy is pulling a hose and he has 1,000 gallons or something along those lines. But maybe not 1,000. You never know. There's also going to be a difference in the power plant that's used to provide the energy for these hydraulic sprayers to work, these hydraulic pumps. Those could be through a tractor PTO, an electric engine, so it runs off battery, or a gas engine. Most commonly, I think Honda has probably cornered the market in small engines in this field. Granule spreaders. Okay, so let's talk about this. So components of a granule spreader. We have the hopper, which is going to hold the material, right? You're going to pour your material in the hopper. We have a metering device, which is also known as the feeder gate. That's what you're going to open, which allows the material to come down into the flywheel, so to say, that's going to fling the material or down into the drop spreader. And then we have a mechanical agitator. And that agitator is going to agitate the material within the hopper down into the feeder gate so it can be continuously spread. It's advised and probably a good idea to clean your granule spreaders after each job or each day. And then this is, to not result in clogging or mixing of materials or, damage to components. Some stuff's corrosive, and so it could wear on some metal parts. And if you're going to clean it, you should wear personal protective equipment. That is highly recommended. Again, if you look at the label, it will tell you that if you have to clean equipment, you need to wear your PPE. And then let's talk about some hand push spreaders, because this is the most common thing that you'll see homeowners using. I don't see this as much in professional outfits, but it might be necessary. Maybe you can't get a ride on in and you need to just use a push spreader to get back to a certain spot. They're ideal for smaller areas, obviously, because you have to walk and push them. You don't want to be pushing acres and acres and acres of fertilizer all day long. There's two different kinds. There's rotary and drop spreaders. Drop spreaders, they drop the material straight down on the ground. And rotary spreaders, they have that spinning flywheel. So as the gates open to allow the material down as you're walking, those wheels that you're pushing are spinning this flywheel, so to say, and it's rotating around, flinging out material. And it flings out on average in between 6 and 8 feet. The one downfall for a rotary spreader is that it's not an even amount and you have to overlap. And because you're not getting an even amount, it's really difficult to know how much was placed where, etc. All right. So let's talk about applying the pesticides. How you perform your application is equally important as the pesticide itself. The reason for that is because you have to know what you're doing. You have to have everything calibrated. You have to take the proper steps and precautions. You have to make the right movements. And then that's how you're going to make an adequate application, right? Over applying a product doesn't mean you're going to have better results. In fact, you can have worse results. Or you could kill off-target insects. You could have off-target damage. There's a lot of things that can happen. And under application is basically a poor pest management practice. You're supposed to apply it at the label rate. And so if you're under the label rate, you might not be effective. You might start to create resistances, which is not the thing that you want to do. So we have to apply according to the label. The label's the law. It's a legal document, and we need to follow it. So let's talk about some application techniques and pest habits. Applying pesticides where pests are. I'm sorry, I read that wrong. Applying pesticides where pests are not is a waste of time and energy and product. So I think of this in terms of turf grass. I see guys online all the time that they're talking about they want to do blanket applications of 2,4-D or whatever on a property, 4 times a year or whatever it is. And the reality is they don't need to do that. Okay, you might have to do one blanket application to get things under control, but then at that point, you want to start doing spot treatments. So if you're just doing blanket applications all the time, that's not how IPM works. Realistically, if you're doing a good job in the turf grass, you want to be applying less and less pesticides. There are some activities that can affect pesticide applications like irrigation or mowing. Some products need to be watered in immediately, like a celloprene. It's recommended for it to be watered in, or applying right before a rain or even in a rain, depending on what you're into. Mowing, you could apply something and then a mowing company comes and they just cut it right off. That's not ideal. So these are some things that we need to be aware of. It's nice to know a client's irrigation schedule or their mowing schedule. And it's also nice to be in contact with them and let them know, hey, you need to, water in this product or don't water in this product, depending on what it is, right? It's not ideal to apply an herbicide on a lawn and then immediately when you're done, it gets rain. You want it to have some dry time. You also want to think about the ideal time to target a pest, right? When is that pest most vulnerable? Is it during its feeding, its germination, as far as plants go? What about the inoculation? At what point is the pest most vulnerable? I relate this to mosquitoes. Mosquitoes, the best time to kill them is actually when they're larvae. You can decimate hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of mosquitoes by just doing larvicide treatments, which sets up the year to have less and less mosquitoes on properties. Crabgrass has a certain time where it's most vulnerable to herbicides. Various plants do. And then there's times when it's not ideal, right? And we shouldn't be applying for that. Pesticide applications should be a tailored fit to each property. Every property is different. And so if you're doing just a blanket application regimen, that's not really tailored fit. You're just doing the same thing at every property, but every property is different. So we need to be conscious of that, and we need to make efforts to not do that. Okay, so this one I'm going to disappear because, there's a lot going on here. Okay, so applying granular pesticides. So the reason why I put this picture on here is because this looks like it was a drop spreader, and you can see that there are some darker lines and some lighter lines, and it looks like maybe they thought that they had a rotary spreader and not a drop spreader, and you can see that there was some fertilizer that was missed. And so this can happen. Say you're doing a chemical application on a lawn. If you had a drop spreader, the same thing could happen and you're missing stuff. But if we're going to use a hand push drop spreader, we want to use chemical resistant gloves, long pants, long sleeves, chemical resistant footwear. And then obviously we want to check the label for all the necessary PPE for handling, mixing, and loading. A lot of labels will contain aprons or masks if you're dealing with dust particles or granules, just because there is dust particles from that. So you always want to pay attention to the label. You want to fill your spreader on a paved surface. The reason for that is because it's easier to clean up if you spill. Makes sense, right? Let's talk about like the actual application here. You want to make 2 complete passes around the outer edge of the property. Now, this isn't in the same line. You want to know your swath and how you're distributing your material. So if you're using a drop spreader, then you need to make 2 passes and have the proper spread between those passes. And the reason for that is now you have a header strip, so you know where you can stop a feeder gate and you've already treated. You want to make parallel passes within that area that you just outlined with a slight overlap. When you make a turn on the next pass, you want to shut off that spreader gate, right? Close the feeder gate. And then that's until you've exited the header strip, those 2 passes that you just made, and then you turn it back on. If you're going around an obstacle, you might want to shut it off depending on what's going on. You want to keep the spreader level or as level as possible. And you really want to walk a consistent pace. If you start to run or sprint, you're going to be putting down a different amount of material than if you're at a steady pace. Also, never stop with the feeder gate open. Why? Because the material will just fall right out and you could risk burning or an over application of whatever it is you're using. And also, do not apply a spreader backwards or use unacceptable patterns. It's not advisable. You're not going to get a quality treatment. And so why would we do that? Okay, so operating and maintaining sprayers. Having safe and properly maintained equipment is essential to provide safe and effective pest management pesticide applications. It's the truth, right? We learned about that in the previous chapter with Regulation 636 telling us that we needed to have up-to-date, leak-free, properly working, what was I going to say? Sprayers and spreaders, right? And so this is what we need to do prior to spraying. We got to put on our PPE. Bam. Okay. Simple. Put on your, whatever the label recommends, it's what you put on. You want to rinse out the system. If you do have to rinse out the system, you want to check your gun, your hose, your nozzles, nozzle screens, your strainers. And then, while you have some water in the system, you want to verify that the nozzles are the same pattern, the same type, size, and angle of spray. Because like I said, there's a lot of different nozzles. You could have some nozzles that are 4 gallons per minute, some that are 0.5. And if you've mixed up and put the wrong nozzles in, you could have a incorrect application. And then we fill the tank with water after we rinse it out. You want to check the entire system for leaks, check your hoses, all your fittings, check your pump, check everything. Once you do that, you verify there's no leaks. Then you adjust the nozzle height and the spacing. After that, you check for equal distribution of water from nozzles. You can use a cup for 20 seconds at each nozzle, collect the water and see how much comes out and make sure that everything is equal and the same. It's pretty simple. Pretty simple. So let's talk about operating and maintaining sprayers. During the application, you want to apply all the pesticides in accordance with the manufacturer label. I'll say it a million times. The label is the law. Okay? It is a legal document. You have to follow it. You have to know your labels. You will always wear your PPE, and you do not exceed the pressures or speeds beyond the manufacturer specifications. That's because if you go beyond the pressures and the speeds recommended, you could have accidents, you could have spills, bad things could happen. You don't want to do it. You also want to frequently check for clogged nozzles, because if you have a clogged nozzle, you could change up the spray pattern and not have a uniform treatment. If that's the case, you'll notice it. You'll notice the results. And this one's a funny one, but there's a reason why they put it in the book. Never try to clean nozzles with your mouth. Okay, don't just go and blow it out. That's not okay. That has pesticides all over it. Your mouth will absorb pesticides. Do not do that, please, for the love of God. Okay, so operating and maintaining sprayers continued. After spraying, what do? Well, we want to clean out the inside and the outside of the sprayer. if we're switching to another product, if we're performing maintenance, or if we're performing repairs. And if you're going to do that, you always wear your PPE. We also want to follow Regulation 637, which means washing and rinsing of equipment is on an impervious pad, and it must be designed to contain the materials. Don't forget that. Herbicide residues, we should talk about them because they are very difficult to get out of systems. You should never use herbicide equipment for other types of applications like insecticides, fungicides, etc. I know in turf, it's very common to mix herbicides and fungicides, or herbicides and insecticides, because you're applying it on the turf. But if you're a hybrid company that operates doing turf grass and ornamentals, you do not want to use an herbicide in a tank and then go and spray ornamentals. I mean, it's going to result in a disaster. And then lastly, we want to inspect and make all necessary repairs to the equipment. Again, we want good operating equipment. That way we don't have downtime. That way we don't have accidents. We don't have spills. We don't have leaks. We're an upstanding pesticide applicator out there. All right, so applying pesticides with showerhead nozzles. Showerheads are mostly used in turf, right? We want to wear our PPE as always, per the label. You hold it pointed away from your legs. So most guys that I see, they hold it pointed out like this at an angle downward in front of them or to the sides of them. Maybe they're spraying to the right or to the left of them, and they walk in that pattern. You do not want to drape the hose over your neck, because if that was dragged or drugged through herbicide-laden turf, well, guess what? You're going to get exposure on your neck, and that will readily absorb pesticides, especially if you're sweating, right? So don't do that. Hold it in front of you, right? You got a hose in one hand, the nozzle in the other, and you're pulling and spraying at the same time. Also, before you enter the area to be treated, you want to pull the trigger. The reason for that is because you want to equalize the pressure in the hose. Pretty essential to have a uniform treatment so you have equal pressures. You want to apply it uniformly and accurately. You walk in parallel lines, and then use natural barriers for straight edges like roads, sidewalks, driveways, things like that, right? Wood lines. I mean, whatever you got to use, you have natural barriers so that way you know your pattern when you're walking. So how do we protect our equipment against failure? We do regular inspections and maintenance. That's pretty self-explanatory, pretty basic, pretty common sense. You do not want to defer maintenance, okay? Maintenance is critical. Inspect your hoses, inspect your connections, inspect your pump, look for cracks, look at your tanks. Are there any cracks? Did anything happen? Very, very easy to inspect. If you're using ride-ons, you're going to be doing maintenance to the motors, to the wheels, to the casters, everything. So you definitely want to stay up and up on the maintenance. And then have a safety checklist. It's pretty simple. Just make a safety checklist. What do I need to do? I need to inspect this, 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 this. And honestly, if you have all these things, if you have safety checklists and checklists in the morning for before you even leave the yard with your vehicle, that can actually reduce your insurance, in case you didn't know that. So last slide, here we go. What happens if equipment fails in the field? It does happen, okay? And we do our best to make sure it doesn't happen, but it does happen. You want to do everything you can to prevent leaks and spills, first and foremost, right? Which comes from maintaining and repairing equipment as you need to. If a hose is leaking or breaks, you want to turn off the pump, drain the hose into a bucket, and put it back into the spray tank. And then what happens if you find the leak? Hopefully, if that hose is leaking at the very end, maybe towards where the gun is, you can make a in the field cut and put in the hose and adjust the clamp and be good to go. Simple fix. If it's in the middle of the hose, not as lucky. That's going to be a little bit more of a challenge, not as fun to fix, more expensive. You also want to have a repair kit just in case of emergencies, right? What happens if you don't have anything? Well, then you're not prepared and you can't fix anything if you need to. So you want spare gloves just in case, right? It's always good to have spare gloves, ideally chemical resistant gloves. Whatever the label calls for on your products, that's the type of gloves you want, because you're probably going to be dealing with, a pesticide spill or a leak of some kind. You want an adjustable wrench. Maybe you have to adjust something, a valve. Maybe you have to adjust something on a motor. Maybe you have to adjust something on the hose, on the pump. So you need this. A slotted screwdriver and a Phillips screwdriver, always good to have. You never know which one you're going to need, so have both. You want a knife. Like I said, what if the hose breaks and you need to make a quick field repair? You can cut off an end after you drain the hose, put in your fitting, adjust the hose clamp, bada bing, bada boom, you're back to work. And then you also want spare parts for your spray gun or your backpack sprayer. Always good to have spare parts, right? And get familiar with your sprayers and your spray parts. Know how they work. Take things apart, put them back together. You want cleaning brushes. Think nozzles or screens getting clogged. Scrub away, boom, boom, boom. You're good to go. Teflon tape. That's going to be mainly used for plumbing. Fittings, making sure stuff's not leaking. You might have to, fix a leak, and Teflon tape might be the fix. Hose clamps to like I said, those fittings. A lot of spray guns will have quick connect fittings that they have a barb that goes into the hose, and it requires a hose clamp. So you always want extras just in case something happens, you lose one, whatever. Hose connectors, always a good idea to have. And last but not least, Old Faithful duct tape. Duct tape can get you through a day. It's not a permanent fix, that's for sure, but it can definitely get you through a day and reduce a leak substantially, which means you're reducing the pollution in the environment that you're producing from not maintaining your equipment or from an accident that happens out there. So that wraps up chapter 4. It's a pretty easy one, pretty simple. What can you do, right? It's pretty simple. It's spray parts and granular spreader parts, things like that. It's all relatively simple once you get familiar with it. What I will say is thank you for watching. And if you're a Michigan pesticide applicator and you've made it this far, I highly recommend you check out our website, which is elevate-applicate.com. We have a membership in which we offer continuing education credits for pesticide applicators just like you. And it's really simple. There's 2 ways to renew your license here in Michigan. You can either do it through taking the tests and the exams again, which kind of suck, or you can do it through continuing education credits. Continuing education credits, I find, are the best. It's the easiest. And what we do is we offer a membership. And through that membership, you have unlimited access to all of the seminars that we offer. If you want to check out what seminars we're offering right now, just go to www.elevate-applicate.com/current-seminars. And you'll have a list. You'll see what categories they were approved in. Just become a member and bam, now you're in to get your pesticide applicator credits. And we're adding more, right? My whole goal with this turf pest management program that I'm putting up on YouTube is actually to turn it into, pesticide application credits. So that's the goal. Hopefully it will be. Hopefully it'll be in like a month or so. Also, I got to give a little notice here. Chapters 5 and 6 are going to be somewhat delayed. I have to do a speaking event for the Michigan Green Industry Association. I'm actually going to be teaching 2 classes there for a total of 4 pesticide continuing education credits. So I'll be speaking in front of like 200 to 300 pesticide applicators from Michigan, from Ohio, and teaching them all about, best management practices for pesticide applications, and then also the law. So it should be fun. If I see you there, awesome. Come say hi. Come tell me, that you found me on YouTube, and yeah. But if not, then I will see you guys in chapter 5 in probably about a week's time, maybe 10 days, once this is released. So other than that, take care and God bless. I'll see you in the next one.